Let's see, go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. Just one more on Israel.
Sure.
As this crisis, gets worse and worse every day, are there any concerns that we might not be able to hit the Afghanistan withdrawal deadline and might need to intervene in a peacekeeping fashion somehow?
No.
No, not at all. Okay.
I've not been made aware of any concern of the overlapping of an impact on our Afghan withdrawal.
Glad to hear it. On a different notion, or a different subject rather, the mask guidance again. Has this triggered a new conversation about whether we need to have, perhaps not a mandate, but a standard vaccine passport that businesses can use, or is this decision going to be left up to the states? I know the president was pretty critical of his predecessor for sort of taking that hands-off approach.
It has not changed our view that the federal government will not be playing that role. The private sector may, and it may prompt the private sector moving forward on actions, which is where we think it's appropriately situated. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. So EU officials actually announced earlier that Johnson & Johnson would be cutting its COVID-19 vaccine deliveries to the bloc by about half this week, and they were already behind schedule for the second quarter. Just in light of Biden's apparent announcement later that he's going to be sending 20 million vaccine doses abroad, is there any, do you have any readouts for what countries are actually, these vaccines are actually going to be sent to?
So let me just make sure I understand your question. So which countries are going to get these 80 million doses that we are announcing? It's a great question. I know everybody's eager to know where are they going. I expect we'll have more in the coming days on what our criteria will be and our approach and some of where it will be sent to once it's approved through the FDA.
On the EU, was disputes over intellectual property have at all to do with reduced exports there, or any conversation?
I think that's really a question for Johnson & Johnson and their manufacturing.
And one more question. Mm-hmm. And then, so inflation numbers obviously last week came back higher than were expected. As the Biden administration deliberates internally on the American Jobs and Families Plan, would consistent levels of inflation or changes in the jobs reports influence the proposals that you all will be bringing to Congress in the package, or changing some of the policies that you all would propose if that continues?
Is, just to make sure I understand your question, are the CPI numbers from a few weeks ago impacting our proposals that we are?
Change any policies you would propose, given increased inflation numbers, or?
No, it's a good question. I just want to make sure I understood it. It is, as we looked and dug into the data, and we talked about this a little bit last week, some of this data is kind of fascinating, I will say, but is that the economy is turning back on. We take inflation very seriously. Our Secretary of Treasury, obviously the Federal Reserve is responsible for monitoring it, but there are a number of factors as the economy turns back on, including there are areas like the cost of airline tickets, where if you look back at pre-pandemic, they dropped by about 20%. They're up about 10% since then, right? So there are prices where the baseline was actually lower than it was prior to the pandemic, and that's one of the things we're seeing in the data. But it has not changed our view and the view of economists, I would say, around the country, that there's more that needs to be done to put 8.5 million Americans back to work, to ensure that we are getting working families, working mothers, the assistance they need, and to ensure we're competitive over the long term. So it has not changed our overarching objectives and approach and our proposals. Go ahead, George.
Yeah,